About a year ago, I played a gig with a doctoral student from a major state university with a good music program. And he was asking about a barrel that I was playing. And I said, oh, my friend used some of Menig's original reamers and made me a barrel. And he said, I've never heard of that name. And I said, Hans Menig. You know, probably the most famous American immigrated woodwind repairman and craftsman of the 20th century, arguably. Worked for Robert Marcellus, among others. And it's like, Marcellus, where do I know that name from? And again, I reiterate, doctoral student, last year doctoral student in clarinet performance. Got his undergrad in clarinet performance. And I said, well, Menig also did work for Ralph McLean. I'd not heard of Ralph McLean. I said, surely you've heard of Ralph McLean. He was one of the big inspirations of Donald Montanaro. And he blanked on that name. And I said, well, he also taught Harold Wright. Well, okay, he did recognize Harold Wright, thankfully. But I bet you he could tell me 100 composers for electroacoustic or unaccompanied solo clarinet, and there's nothing wrong with that, of course, but when we don't know our history, it's not that we fail to repeat it, it's that we fail to build upon it. We fail to stand on the shoulders. We're starting at zero, we're starting at sea level, rather than the mountains of the people that built before us. So this is where history is important. So I believe, on a very, very, very tacitly related note, that Albert Lelandais was a student of Charles Chedeville. And the reason is I have a very early oval logo Lelandais, a Lelandais mouthpiece. And I've seen a few of these, and the internals are skewed to the right. Specifically, the right side rail is, and the internals is skewed. And several of the original Charles Chedeville Artistic Facing mouthpieces I played have the same internal shape. And I believe that he was learning either alongside Charles or under Charles. I believe under Charles. So this mouthpiece is clearly on a Chedeville blank, but there are no markings on it. This is original facing, and there's something about it that does feel pretty dated to me, like most old original facing mouthpieces. I mean, there's something good about it. There's something really floating in the left-hand clarion. But I kind of get a Stanley Drucker kind of vibe on that throat tone A. And I get a few Druckerisms as I play this mouthpiece, you know. It's good, and I do feel that if it received a nice reface, it could be better. But I'm concerned that it'll never have that modern quality that we look for. But even that playing in an orchestra or demoing a mouthpiece, it won't have it. And you know, a lot of these early mouthpieces are practical in this way. They have something that makes your life sometimes. Makes your life in an orchestra a bit easier. There's a reason why, like Mark Nuccio and others do play Chedevilles today. So this is a Charles Chedeville original facing, just like the other one is original facing. I believe that Lelandais could benefit from a reface, but I don't think this one I would do that. refacers tell me they love to test altissimo on high notes to see just how easy it is. And I don't think I've ever played a mouthpiece with high C being quite that easy. I've never played a mouthpiece where high D is that much of a real note. I mean, there's that dove cooing quality, that kind of David Weber-esque quality about that high D. Do you hear how much more mature those throat tones are? I've played a few Henri Chedeville's that are original facing, and they don't play anything like this. This and my E-flat Charles Artistic Facing are the best two original facing mouthpieces that I've ever played. And Charles Chedeville, in terms of his facings, are so much more usable than any of his peers, in my opinion, today. And it just sounds very contemporary. There's still something very French about it, something very, I hear some McLean in that a little bit. And the internal are very, very, very similar to the Lelandais, just with more attention. The Lelandais almost is like a childish version of the Charles, and you hear again that floating nature in the left hand, the clarion, is very similar between the two mouthpieces. The way both mouthpieces project is very similar. It's just I get a lot more depth in the Charles. All right, now this is another original facing. This is an era further still. It's not an artistic facing blank. It's a Eugene Bercioux SGDG 412725. So we consider this the earliest of the Chedeville blanks. And actually a lot of mouthpieces today are based upon this design. And this was crafted by Eugene Bercioux, who we think was either Charles Chedeville's teacher or Henri Chedeville's teacher, or maybe the financial backer, because at some point he moved from Paris to the United States and he founded the Woodwind Company, he founded Mellophone and a few others. And I will say that Charles, I think I could use that in an orchestra today. And I do use my E-flat Charles in an orchestra today, as is. It's totally practical. This one, perhaps a little less practical, but the characteristic is, in a way, the most modern still. And as a soloist mouthpiece, this is the most practical original facing of the three. So this has that more open, almost more American flavor to it. Reminds me in ways of Bettany's or Caspar's or Frank Wells, Sumner in a way. This is the only mouthpiece of the three. I could almost see this being used in a dance band, you know? Or... Of the three, this is what I would use for Rhapsody in Blue. The throat tones. Compare how much more width in the throat tones. So, definitely the most modern sounding of the three, even though this is like from the 20s. And that Lelandais continued to make mouthpieces into the 50s, but we almost think of Lelandais facings as being less practical. And it's funny because a lot of people will try like a quality superior Lelandais 50s, 40s, 50s period, and think, oh, I can't play an old mouthpiece. But they simply haven't gone far enough back. Because I played that mellophone for 3 years in principal gigs, and I don't anymore for a reason I found a little bit easier for me, but the resonance is totally there. But you hear that the kind of floating singing nature of the clarion, the very focused lean projection of Charles and Lelandais is not quite there in the Bercioux. tip opening thing, all three of these mouthpieces have similar tip openings. The Charles is actually the closest. But the Bercioux and the Lelandais have very similar tip openings, yet what completely different characteristics. So it's interesting that Bercioux came to the United States, and I think he helped define a small contribution to the American sound with the woodwind codes that you think of people using, a little bit more robust, a little bit wider sounds, versus that Lelandais is extremely French. But something was lost going from Bercioux to Chedeville, and something was lost going Chedeville to Lelandais, even though they were, I really believe, until somebody shows me evidence otherwise, they were students of each other. And an interesting thing is, again, in terms of projection, the Charles and the Lelandais have something above the Bercioux.